I'm Chris Beers, in for Steve Lance. We begin with tragic news in New York City. 6 people were killed after a helicopter crashed into the Hudson River this afternoon. According to law enforcement, the helicopter was carrying a family of tourists from Spain, 2 adults and 3 children. A pilot was also on board, bringing the death toll to 6 people.
At this time, all 6 victims have been removed from the water, and sadly, all 6 victims have been pronounced deceased. Again, we're praying for the families and our gratitude to the rescuers and the courage that was displayed in their dedication.
According to witnesses, the helicopter broke apart in midair and crashed upside down into the Hudson River between Manhattan and the New Jersey waterfront. Video posted to social media shows parts of the chopper splashing into the water and the overturned aircraft submerged, with rescue boats circling it. 4 of the victims were pronounced dead on scene, and 2 more died in the hospital. The cause of the crash is still unclear. The Federal Aviation Administration identified the helicopter and plans to investigate. President Trump held his 3rd cabinet meeting this afternoon, speaking to reporters on the latest market reactions and trade negotiation status. It comes a day after he hiked reciprocal tariffs on China to 125%, while giving other countries some relief. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Iris, good evening. What's the latest with Trump's tariffs?
Good evening to you as well, Chris. So today, President Trump confirmed that his second-term tariffs on China is now at 145%. That's as his 125% tariff announced yesterday was actually on top of the 20% that he previously put in place back in February. Meanwhile, Trump today, while declining to say whether China had reached out or not, told reporters that he believed he would reach a deal with China, and that's beneficial for both countries and also stop China from ripping off the U.S. Watch.
They've destroyed our economic base to a large extent. The good news is we're very vibrant, and we're going to get it back fast. We would love to be able to work a deal. They've really taken advantage of our country for a long period of time.
Meanwhile, U.S. stocks fell today after reaching a record high just yesterday. Both President Trump and his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today dismissing market concerns, with Bessent saying that there will be more certainty as trade negotiations play out with different countries, and Trump and saying that there will be a much better situation, especially after some transition problems amid new tariffs. Watch.
We'll end up in a place of great certainty over the next 90 days on tariffs. We had very good inflation numbers today.
There'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
President Trump also touted the latest inflation numbers today, showing that inflation fell sharply in March to 2.4%, the lowest level we've seen in half a year. Back to you.
Iris, what about tariff negotiations with other countries besides China? What's the latest progress there?
Right. So yesterday, Trump announced that he's going to drop his reciprocal tariffs for most countries down to 10% as he gives them time for negotiations and, of course, coming to the U.S. for trade deals. And today, the administration says not only 75 countries have come to the U.S. to negotiate, but also there have been 15 countries who have come with explicit offers. And today, during the cabinet meeting, they say that these offers are unprecedented and very beneficial for the U.S. And Trump today also praised the European Union for pausing their retaliatory measures against the U.S. As Trump says, they have seen what happened to China after they retaliated against U.S. warnings. Chris.
Iris Tao, thank you very much. The European Union today hitting pause on its countermeasures against U.S. levies. This comes after President Trump's decision to put some of his global tariffs on hold for 90 days. EU officials welcomed the move, saying Europe is willing to negotiate.
We appreciate that you have brought this pause on so-called reciprocal tariffs, and we in turn are now pausing our proposed countermeasures. We're ready to make deals. Let's talk.
The European Union approved a 25% retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods yesterday. That was in response to President Trump's levies on foreign steel and aluminum, which was put in place back in February. As of now, the bloc is still facing a baseline 10% tariff, along with duties on cars and critical metals. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen said if negotiations don't come through, countermeasures will be on the table once again. Next, we have some breaking news. The Supreme Court just ruled that the U.S. must bring back a man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. The unanimous ruling upholds a lower court decision about the Maryland man who was deported with a group of alleged gang members. No deadline has been set. Moving on, the House has passed the Senate-approved budget resolution, thus unlocking the next step in the reconciliation process. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the details on this story.
What is your reaction to the passage of the budget resolution and Senator Thune saying this morning that he commits to $1.5 trillion in spending cuts?
I think what we're seeing right now is that Republicans have agreed to gut Medicaid in this country and put many other programs on the chopping block.
All Democrats voted against a budget resolution that would extend the 2017 tax cuts. The entire Republican conference, except Congressman Thomas Massie and Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, voted for the Senate-approved budget resolution.
But there's a lot of pain in those cuts. Some people are looking at the end of their political career. They're making a big decision. And let's see if it's the will of their people.
On paper, the resolution requires the Senate to cut $4 billion in government spending, while the House has a bottom line of $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. So, Congressman, the verbal commitment from the Senate is that $1.5 trillion is the bottom, like the minimum spending cuts.
Correct. That is correct. That's what I heard.
Do you feel confident that the Senate will commit to the $1.5 trillion spending cut that the House Republican Conference is looking for?
I think so. I think the Senator Thune and the other group of senators that I met with yesterday, they could have been more cordial and more honest about their situation. And their situation is no different from our speaker. You know, they have
budget resolution simply allows us to start the actual process of reconciliation. And the House can then jam the Senate. Look, if they don't like the end results of the cuts that we end up negotiating in reconciliation, then they don't have to vote for it.
Republican lawmakers in competitive districts believe that spending and tax cuts will deliver for the American people and gain Republican seats in Congress in next year's midterm elections.
Look, I think as long as we do our job, we deliver middle-class tax relief, if we protect our seniors and our most vulnerable, we're going to do great in the midterms. I think you'll see a big boon in the economy. We're already seeing trillions of dollars invested.
Republicans also celebrated this Thursday the return of Congresswoman Elise Stefanik in her new position as the chairwoman of the House Republican leadership.
That she, wasn't able to go on and become the ambassador, UN ambassador from the United States. Super talented. I love to have her back on the Select China Committee.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson remains committed to sending a reconciliation bill to the president's desk by Memorial Day. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
4 Democrats joined Republicans today to pass on the House floor the SAVE Act, a bill that requires proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. The bill also requires states to establish official programs to remove illegal immigrants from voter rolls. The bill now heads to the Senate. Also today on the Hill, lawmakers share why it's important to continue to highlight both past and present threats of communism and continue to remember the millions of victims of authoritarian regimes. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Communism is not a relic of the past. It remains a present-day threat to freedom, human dignity, and global stability.
At the first event for the House Victims of Communism Caucus, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz says that more than 1.5 billion people still live under communism today.
The dangers of communism are not confined to history books. They are shaping world affairs today. They span from China's mass internment of Uyghurs and suppression of democracy in Hong Kong to Cuba's ongoing repression and North Korea's brutal dictatorship.
Rep. Wasserman Schultz says that these regimes actively undermine America's democracy, suppress free enterprise, and threaten national security.
The Chinese Communist Party steals our intellectual property, spies on Americans, and bullies our allies, all while spreading disinformation to weaken democracies, including our own.
Congressman Joe Wilson says that Russian President Vladimir Putin has set back the Russian Federation.
And sadly, war criminal Putin is trying to resurrect the Soviet Union. And we see that as he has rigged elections in Belarus, as he has rigged the elections in the Republic of Georgia, where indeed President Salome Zurabishvili was legally elected, but due to rigged elections, she was not able to take office because of war criminal Putin.
The bipartisan caucus was established in 2017. Rep. Joe Wilson says that its formation is important.
People need to know the history of communism, the loss, hundreds of millions of people killed and died, and hundreds of millions of people denied a fulfilling life. And it's done for power. And so the concentration of power in the ideology precludes the ability of people to have freedom themselves.
The House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, also focuses on the dangers posed by communism. However, its focus is exclusively on current threats posed by the CCP. The House Committee on the CCP's chairman, Rep. John Moolenaar, was just named U.S. Republican co-chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, or IPAC. The IPAC is a, quote, cross-party entity of legislators from democratic nations working to reform how countries approach relations with the Chinese Communist Party. Moolenaar succeeds Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who co-founded the organization. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Speaking in the Oval Office today, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is working out a deal to secure the Panama Canal from China's influence. This comes just one day after Panama agreed to expand U.S. military training in the region.
A memorandum of understanding with their security minister for the presence of U.S. troops. Fort Sherman is an old U.S. base there. As well as a naval station and air station jointly with Panama to secure the Panama Canal from Chinese influence.
Hegseth was in Panama City for a 3-day security conference this week. Just yesterday, he announced an expanded partnership between the two countries, which includes boosting the U.S. military presence in the region. Hegseth said a broader framework that allows American warships to pass through the Panama Canal first and free is in the works. He added that the U.S. is determined to protect Panama's sovereignty from malign influences. Connecting between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans, the Panama Canal is one of the world's busiest trade routes. China is involved in several major infrastructure projects there, including a partially completed bridge and ports at both ends of the canal. Earlier this year, the Central American nation announced it is withdrawing from China's Belt and Road Initiative, an ambitious infrastructure project largely seen as a way for Beijing to increase its footprint overseas. President Trump has repeatedly spoken out about taking back the Panama Canal, citing China's growing influence in the region. The State Department today announcing more sanctions on Iranian oil trading networks, including on a China-based storage terminal. Officials say the terminal traded crude oil with Iran at least 9 times between 2021 and 2025. The move is part of the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, which seeks to curb funding to Iran's malign activities. As of today, China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil. Next, the Chinese Communist Party's military threat to Taiwan and other U.S. allies in the Pacific is growing. That's the message that top U.S. military commanders gave to members of Congress today. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
China's unprecedented aggression and military modernization poses a serious threat to the homeland, our allies, and our partners.
Top U.S. military officers testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee on Thursday. Admiral Samuel Paparo says instances of Chinese military aggression against Taiwan has increased 300%. This aggression includes encroaching on Taiwanese waterways and conducting military drills near the island.
China's increasingly aggressive actions near Taiwan are not just exercises, They are rehearsals.
Many experts argue that a Chinese military attack on Taiwan could lead to mass deaths and a world economy in chaos.
China has marched into Tibet in the past, and they've marched into Hong Kong in the past, and that was bad, and they shouldn't have done those things. But it didn't lead to World War, and it didn't lead to Great Depression. So why is it that Taiwan is different? Why?
Conflict in the Western Pacific over the Taiwan question would result in a 25% GDP contraction in Asia and a knock-on effect of 10 to 12% GDP reduction in the United States of America, with unemployment spiking 7 to 10 points above base and likely 500,000 excess deaths of despair.
And China has been strengthening its ties with Russia since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, and China is watching closely for the outcome.
Russian failure and/or Russian success has the effect of deterring or emboldening the People's Republic of China.
That's as North Korea is building up its weapons arsenal while supplying Russian troops.
And over the past year and a half, DPRK has exported munitions and troops to support Russia, demonstrating the ability to provide external support while simultaneously advancing domestic capabilities.
Admiral Paparo says China's growing military capabilities were made possible by trade with the U.S.
In the last 20 years, they've increased their military 10 to 15-fold.
The panel says that senators agreed that there needs to be more funding for long-range munitions and improved ability to counter China's cyber and space systems. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
6 lawmakers from New York and New Jersey were aboard an airplane waiting for takeoff when it was bumped by a second plane. The FAA confirmed that the wingtip of an American Airlines aircraft struck another American Airlines aircraft. This happened at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport around 12:45 p.m. local time. Congressman Nick LaLota and Josh Gottheimer and Congresswoman Grace Mung wrote in an X posts that no one on board was injured. LaLota said Congressman Gregory Meeks, Richie Torres, and Adriano Espaillat were also on board the plane. The incident did not affect flight operations at Reagan.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.